Welcome to Eerie Essex. I'm Bethan Briggs-Miller.
And I'm Ailsa Clark.
Thank you for joining us on our journey into the strange side of the county.
We will be exploring the folklore, urban legends and supernatural encounters that form part of its rich history. Hello and welcome to Eerie Essex, a darker shade of Yule. This is our Christmas episode and we're joined by two very special guests, Jo Hickey-Hall and Icy Sedgwick.
Yay!
And we're so excited to have you both. It's lovely seeing you.
Okay, yeah, thank you for having us. It's lovely to be here. Feels quite Christmassy. We're nearly there and yeah, it's nice.
The winter solstice too.
Oh yes, that's right. That's where I've been today.
I love the fact I'm nodding like people are going to know that I'm nodding on audio.
We're always doing that. Like, it was this big.
I think last episode, me and Peter were doing like a contortion off on the screen.
But no one was talking.
No one could see it.
Just...
like it.
Yeah. Oh, we have some fun, don't we? But yeah, we're very excited to have Jo and Icy, two of the people who probably, definitely started me and Ailsa off. So we're joined by our heroes. So we fangled already, so we didn't hit record until we got it out of our system. Can you tell us a bit about yourselves? Icy.
Oh, I never know what to say in these things. But yeah, I'm Icy Sedgwick of Fabulous Folklore. In case, obviously, anyone hadn't twigged by the accent, I am from Newcastle-upon-Tyne. No, Geordie Shore is not real. And yeah, I've been interested in folklore literally since I was 10. And just as we started recording this, I was showing you some of the pamphlets that I got. And they were £1.50. And they've got a 1990 copyright on them. So both dating myself and also showing how long I've been interested in sort of Northeast folklore and so on. I'd like to spread the joy.
And you do.
And of course, we've had Jo on the podcast before.
We have. And I met Jo for the first time last week and it was lovely.
Right, the Mercy Museum, the Deepenings Project, which is really so great and worth checking out. And like you say, the videos are online now.
Yeah, you can check them out on YouTube.
Brilliant. So many people I know that would have loved that to be there. So I'm Jo from Modern Fairy Sightings Project and podcast. And yeah, I'm kind of interested in people's fairy experiences, as some of the listeners know if they've heard me on this before. And I'm actually from Jersey, which you probably can't tell from my accent. And I have to say, Jersey Housewives probably is a bit real, sadly. But I think Geordie Shore is probably a bit more exciting.
Yeah, we got Towie to contend with.
Yeah, I was going to say I can't say I've ever really watched an episode of Towie, so I couldn't tell you whether it's real or not. But they did used to shoot. They shot a couple of episodes in the estate where I live at one point. So maybe it's real.
Maybe. Were you in it?
I'm a Towie skeptic.
Towie skeptic. I'm a believer.
The only one out of all of those I properly watched was Made in Chelsea, which
I used to love Made in Chelsea.
Oh my goodness, yeah, we were massive fans.
So tonight is probably the perfect night for swapping a spooky tale, a spooky bit of folklore. Ailsa, you're going to be covering Essex.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to step out of Essex just for the night. I'm going to hop back home to Wales and share some things from there. I see what you're going to share with us tonight.
Going to be Northumberland and a little bit of Newcastle.
Fab. And Jo?
I've kind of let the side down here then, so I really should have been tucking into all of the, the West Country. There's just a plethora of experiences for this time of year, but I'm all about Santa experiences at the moment, I'm afraid. And yeah, I'm just sort of trying to squeeze it into as many conversations as I can.
No, that's brilliant. It's perfect for this episode.
Thank you. Well, it's a good excuse, and I'd really like to sort of hear what you all think and what what the listeners think as well.
Do you want to go ahead and start telling us some Santa stories then?
I can indeed. I can tell you about my journey with Santa experiences. Well, so recently, for the last episode I just released, which was last Sunday, what date would that have been? Whatever date that was, just before Christmas, I had spoken to a guy about a month ago, and he had told me that he had seen something one Christmas time. He'd had a experience around Christmas time. So, I got round to speaking to him probably sort of end of November, and I wasn't quite prepared for what he was going to tell me, to be honest with you. He started telling me that he had been in his room on Christmas Eve. He was 20 at the time. And he had heard this noise on the roof. There'd been a noise of what sounded like a sled, like a loud thump, and then a kind of sliding on the roof. Hooves. He heard something then like a thud with somebody getting out of something and walking around, and then the noise of something very heavy, like a large weight landing on the roof. And then, but the main thing, which was mind-blowing, was he heard sleigh bells. And I know, this to me, when I was listening to this, I was just, when he'd finished telling me, I just said, well, that's bonkers, isn't it? And that was my reaction, because it honestly hit my boggle threshold. And so I talked about that in the episode as well, that, we all have a boggle threshold. And this kind of term was coined by Renee Hayes, who was a historian of psychical research. I think it was the 70s, this was. And she, she talked about the fact that when researchers are doing their thing, with psi research and all the rest of it, if there are some really crazy, nutty bits of data that they get back, they will just kind of disregard them as outliers because they're just too bonkers to even consider including, right? And this is something we all do, and it depends on various factors like our own experiences, our beliefs, knowledge, and just our general sense of what's possible in the world. And so there's me kind of talking to people about fairy experiences and werewolves and orbs, and having had loads of experiences myself, really way out stuff, and for me that's totally normal. And yet when this guy was talking to me about a Santa experience, I was like, what? So we all have a boggle threshold. So I kind of did to him what other people would do if they heard a fairy experience. It just doesn't kind of quite compute, because it's beyond what we thought was potentially possible. So for that reason as well, I felt this is why I guess talking about it is helping me process it in some ways, because what happened next was that I then went on to the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast group on Facebook and said, I've just spoken to this guy, because honestly, by the end of the conversation and just by talking to him, I found it extremely compelling. He wasn't saying, oh yeah, this happened and then I heard Santa. Not at all. He was saying, this happened and it's really weird, and can't quite get my head around it. And he hasn't been
20 at the time. It wasn't like a kid misremembering.
This is it. He was at college at the time. He was homestaying with his parents. This is in Washington State. And
I was about to say he was 20, a college student. I was wondering whether he just had come home from a really good night out. But if 20 in America is below drinking age, isn't it?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, he said it had just been kind of a normal Christmassy evening where they'd been out as a family for something to eat and then come home, and not really much had happened. But when I went on the group and said, what do you think of this? And loads of people came back and said, yeah, this happened to me too. And this one guy, and I think this is really touching actually, he said, I'm just going to read it out to you. And he's given me permission to share this, by the way. I asked him specifically about this. He said, I've never told anyone this in my whole life, but felt I finally wanted to share after this episode. So he'd listened to it. I'm 45 now, but when I was young, probably 7 or 8, I saw what I believed to be Santa in my room. I know how outlandish that sounds, and I have to stress it wasn't a jolly guy dressed in red with a big beard. It was the early hours of Christmas Day. No idea of the time, but the house was silent. So I'm guessing early hours. I woke up and was aware of someone in my bedroom. I could make out a large figure in the corner of the room, not standing or sat down, but sort of like knelt on one knee, I guess. I said hello and asked if he was Father Christmas. It never spoke, but I got the sense that he nodded. I need to point out I couldn't make out any features here, just the silhouette outline of a large person. I said hello again and got out of bed and took a step towards him. My bedroom wasn't very big. I reached out my arm and touched what I assumed to be his forearm, and it was real and solid. At this point, I got scared and jumped back into bed, and when I looked back over, nothing whatsoever. It had gone. It could have been my imagination, I guess. It absolutely wasn't a dream. I know that much, but yeah, I felt compelled to share that with you after 38 plus years of keeping it to myself. It only happened that once. It wasn't scary until I touched it, and it was a real thing. That's the only time my heart was racing. It was quite a zen vibe, to be fair, until the point I realised this thing was actually in my room. And then young me freaked out a bit. I think about it every Christmas and wonder what it could have been.
Wow.
Wow. I don't even know how I'd react if that happened. How old was he?
He said about
7 or
7.
8. Yeah, 7 or 8.
That's incredible. I can't believe he said it was a zen vibe until the point where if there was even on Christmas, if there was some big guy in my room who just turned up, I would be back under the covers, scared stiff immediately.
The thing is, though, this is what people find from their fairy experiences. People think I'd be absolutely terrified if that happened to me. And I think I would have said the same. But honestly, it's not like that unless they are really scary and horrible. It's not like that. It is a really natural feeling. It's like seeing something really amazing in nature and then just going, wow. It's like there's that connection, and there's an innate knowing in us as human beings. So when we see something of wonder, we know if it's really scary, obviously, but we know when it's just something really wonderful that's just we can properly be in awe of. That kind of
can you imagine if it turned out that there was a Santa? How great that would be.
Well, this is the thing. It's made my Christmas, honestly, because being a mum, I've always thought, oh, well, if you say to the, I've had to go through it twice with my older ones, getting to the point where they'll say, Mum, is he real? And then at that point, they kind of know he's not. And I'll say, no, he's not. This is when they're sort of 11 or whatever.
I always had the feeling that I was pretending for my parents, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like there was they were just a bit too, yes, Santa is real, and we don't put the presents under the tree at all. They were a bit too sort of, tongue in cheek about it. So when it got to that stage, it was like, do I keep on pretending that I'm believing them? Because they've never been serious about it.
Yeah, I had to sit my parents down and say, Mum, Dad, I think I'm old enough now. I know there's no Santa. It was role reversal.
Yeah.
That'll be great.
It's really sweet.
To be honest, I listened to that story and I thought, wow, this would make a great cold open for a horror movie.
Yeah, but
that's my brain.
Yeah.
It's pretty much this the how Violent Night starts, isn't it? I've already seen the trailer. It wasn't going to be long before I brought up David Harbour.
Yes, I know, because you've already done it twice before we started recording.
Well, Jo wasn't in the room when I swooned. I have a thing for Santa, Jo.
I haven't seen
This is a newly discovered thing that Bethan's talked about endlessly.
Okay. Oh.
It's ruined my view of Santa, seeing David Harbour as the man in red. You don't come back from that.
I'm going to have to look this up now. Hang on.
What about you, Icy? Have you ever had any Santa experiences, or what was it? Did your parents pretend to be Santa, or did they ever?
They did, and there was quite a famous time when my mum and dad had to wrap a present up for, I think it was a neighbour, and my brother, I don't remember this, but they tell the story, and my brother apparently went, we've got the same wrapping paper as Santa. Oh no. And I think David took a little bit longer to cotton on.
That's brilliant.
I don't remember how I discovered that it was me mum and dad, or how old I was. I honestly can't remember, but I do remember it used to be a really big tradition to go into town to see Phoenix windows, because they'd always, like, the department store would always put these windows.
Got a Phoenix too.
And then you would queue for hours to look at some windows and then go and sit on Santa's knee and tell him what you wanted. And I just love the idea of going and doing that now and sitting on his knee, and if he was like, so little girl, what would you like for Christmas? Not sure you'd necessarily be able to bring his Robert Pattinson, but hope springs eternal.
What would you wish for, Jo, if you were sat on Santa's knee?
I'm gonna have a think about that. I'm thinking, I lie down in a dark room, not with Santa. Just
I think you might change your mind after watching the trailer. We'll come back to that.
I think
Bethan's wish would be with Santa.
A spa retreat away from everything.
Well, that does sound good as well.
I was actually pictured sitting on Santa's knee in the local paper, Jersey Evening Post. So it must have been about 1980.
Oh,
sitting on his knee, And it must have been they had a photographer from the newspaper there. It was me and another little girl, one on each knee. I have to find that.
Probably not allowed to sit on Santa's knee now, are they?
No, I
I
don't
just
think
think,
so.
imagine if you were the awkward kid who was like, I would like an end to capitalism, Santa. Like, what would he do?
That would be me. Because you asked like, oh, what would your wish to Santa would be? I'd be like, oh, it'd be an end to the Tories.
End to Tory rule. I think Santa could sort that. I reckon
I think he could.
Well,
Just
if he's one
drop
of the
him on
three, he could
10
sort
Downing Street.
anything.
We'll have to. We have got access to a Santa because Owen from Time Between Times has just done a massive stint as Santa, so we could ask him for his weirdest request.
I think Ben Pates also did a stint as Santa at Colchester Castle recently. I've just seen
that's the
his Twitter
curator.
as well.
Yeah,
And didn't your friend Dean do
Magic Dean?
Yeah.
My friend Magic Dean has gone viral because he's Santa, and there's a really I've never heard of him, but he sounds really cool. He's a famous like influencer on TikTok. He's got Tourette's and he like records his journey. And he went to see my friend Dean. Sorry, he went to see Santa. Dean's just the nicest person, like this big burly Welsh guy living in Colchester, and he was so funny. Like some of the things that I think his name was Jack was saying, because he pointed to the snow and said, "Oh, is that cocaine?" It just came out, and then Jean just went, "Oh, not that kind of Christmas." And they ended up laughing together. It was lovely, and it's gone viral. And we just love Dean Allen Jones. He is awesome, and he listens to all our shows, so he'll get a real kick out of that.
Oh, hello, Dean.
Hey, Dean. Do you want to ply us with some Essex?
Do we want to get scary now?
Yes,
That's
always yes.
After Joe's brilliant story, that was very heartwarming.
Well, you could be the Krampus
and terrify you,
Santa.
Well, I can say to slide you into that next section, there is a kind of Santa Essex situation that was a 2013 trauma over Canvey Island double Santa sighting, right?
Oh.
Now, it's very silly though. Father Christmas was told to leave a town centre over fears children would be traumatised by the sight of two Santas in the same street. So there was a bit of a kick-off because there were two people dressed as Santa in the street, and it made the paper. A town council officer told us we had to take our Santa away as the Rotary Club Santa had arrived at the other end of Christmas market round the corner.
There's your film. There's your Christmas film.
That is a celebrity death
Battle of the
that I think
Santas.
we all want.
The Rotary Club versus the Council Santa. Richard Curtis, if you're listening, next year's sorted.
Hilarious.
Who would play the Santas?
David Harbour would have to be one of them.
Yeah, David Harbour versus, was it Richard Curtis who did the other?
Well, Billy Bob Thornton played him in Bad
Bad
Santa.
Santa.
Yeah, that's a really good film.
There we go. We'll pit them against each other on Canvey Island.
And then Canvey Island suddenly becomes American for no good reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So do we want to hear about a very haunted street?
Yeah.
So the Royal Terrace, which overlooks the Thames Estuary, is one of the oldest streets in Southend. It dates back to around the 1700s. It was originally called the Grand Terrace when it was first built, but it was subsequently renamed the Royal Terrace in honour of Princess Caroline, the Prince Regent's wife, who's visited in about 1803, because if you go somewhere, they rename it Royal something. This area appears to have several ghost stories associated with it. There's one terrifying account of a leprous, I hope I'm saying that correctly because I kept on saying it lecherous earlier.
Very different thing.
It's really hard to differentiate between those sounds. A leprous ghost that appears. And this story comes from a handwritten journal that was passed down through the years until it was published in the Essex Chronicle. And the name of the journal is brilliant. It was Miss Warren's Essex Ghost Book. And I've been looking for this Miss Warren since then, and I can't find her, but she sounds like the sort of person that we'd all want to hang out with.
Yeah.
But because the account is handwritten, it's difficult to tell whether this incident took place in number 1, 7 or 9 of the Grand Terrace. And the account of the haunting came from a Mr. Martin, who was staying at the terrace sometime between 1887 and 1893. He described one night how the flickering candle in his room suddenly guttered and the sound of loud clattering filled the room. The temperature dropped significantly and a pair of livid eyes, in his words, full of pain and utmost devilry, appeared in front of him. Mr. Martin cried out, "Who are you? What do you want?" But the apparition disappeared immediately. So Mr. Martin the next day questioned his landlord and found out this wasn't the first time that this apparition had appeared, but he was the first person to ever stay in the room after seeing it. Everyone else had run away screaming. So I don't know if Mr. Martin was very brave or very stupid, but he decided to stay another night in that room, and the identical situation occurred. But this time he got to see the apparition's face very clearly. Had a protruding forehead, dark hair, dark eyebrows, 2 yellow swollen eyelids, and cheeks of a purple hue surrounded by a white sickly substance. And the face stared out of the gloom, glistening unhealthily in the candlelight for a few moments before disappearing again.
I mean, you don't want to see your ghost glistening, do you?
Not with a white substance all over it.
The Glistening Ghost would be a great pub name, though.
Yeah, it is,
Yeah.
isn't it? So, according to Miss Warren, who took the account from Mr. Martin, after some further investigation, she found out that some 20 years before, a man had died of leprosy in that room. But it's not the only place he appears. Not too far from the Royal Terrace stands Clifton Court, on the corner between Royal Court and Royal Terrace. Many years after Mr. Martin's ghastly encounter, a young couple moved into the once imposing Clifton Court in around 1966 to 67. They did not stay long, however, because they encountered a very similar apparition to the one seen by Mr. Martin. It appeared twice, once in November and once in March the following year, and it appeared at the end of their bed, draped in a grey cowl, and the room became icy when the phantom appeared, but it disappeared just as quickly, leaving behind an unpleasant earthy smell. So after the second time this happened, the couple called in a vicar to exorcise the room. However, even after the exorcism was performed, the room felt uncomfortable, and the couple quickly moved out. And just to tie this to the next part, just behind the Royal Terrace, there's another street called the Royal Mews. On this street in 1988, a man called Tonio Perrott bought a home that desperately needed renovations. He hired an architect who decided to remove an interior wall in the property, but when the wall came down, a very ghastly discovery was made. A small room was discovered about 5 bricks deep, and inside that room was the wheel of an old wagon. And on that wheel was a skeleton draped over it, held together by the fabric of its clothes that still remained. The police were called and the body was taken away, and the case remains a mystery to this day. But after that discovery, Tonio became aware of the ghost of an old man haunting his house, and the old man is said to carry his walking stick out in front of him. Tonio claims that the ghost doesn't have any ill intentions, so he's happy to live alone with him, despite the first appearance of this man giving Antonio and his wife quite a fright. There is another presence, however, in this house who appears at certain times, a dark shape that can be seen out the corner of your eye and precedes a great drop in temperature, like our leprous ghost that's also seen in Clifton Court. One psychic who visited the house said that the dark shape is a man with a deformed hand and a degenerative disease. So could this be the same phantom? The most spectacular occurrence in this area occurs on Christmas Eve every year, just before midnight. Tonio and his friends have even made an annual tradition out of it. Before midnight, Tonio will gather everyone in the street, and they only have to wait a couple of minutes before they can hear the sounds of horses on cobblestones, even though the street is now tarmacked. They can also hear the calls of a coachman and even the scent of the sweat of horses and manure, and it's like being taken back into that time period. The scene only lasts a few moments before the noise heads towards the high street. And it seems that Tonio's tradition of gathering his friends on the street to witness the event is more than just for fun. Tonio believes that the energy of the people gathered in the street actually allows the spectacle to happen.
Is anyone else thinking what I'm thinking?
What are you thinking?
Let's go.
Yeah, it sounds like fun, doesn't it?
It sounds like a great night out. Do you know where it is and when it is?
Yes, it's on the Royal Mews. It will be on the 24th of December, a few minutes to midnight. So I'm not encouraging people to go swarming the Royal Mews in Southend. In fact, please don't, because I think that would probably get us in big trouble. But I do have another phantom coach that appears on Christmas Eve. This one appears in Havering in Essex, and the carriage has a famous occupant, one Abigail Masham, whose home once stood in Havering. Abigail was a close confidant of Queen Anne and cousin to Sarah Churchill, Duchess of Marlborough. If you've seen The Favourite, you already know who I'm talking about. I believe that Abigail was played by Emma Stone.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Yeah. And then Sarah was Rachel Weisz and the Queen was Olivia Colman. So, you know, great combination. So her carriage is said to appear driving through the high street every Christmas, which seems to be a lovely time of year for ghosts to take a joyride. I've found several carriages that like to start up around Christmas Eve. So that's my first Essex ghost story this evening.
Well, I think you started with a bloody good one.
Yeah, I love that Royal
An
Terrace.
immurement. Is it immurement?
Immurement?
Immurement? On a wheel?
Is that what they call finding a desiccated body on a wheel?
No, yeah, behind a wall. So
okay.
Immured. Either immured or immured. I don't know. But nasty way to go.
It sounds like that first fella knew what he was doing, because those two questions, who are you and what do you want? Sounds like he might have known.
Been prepared.
There.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he was kind of into it, and then when he got the opportunity to stay another night, he did.
Would you?
Oh, it depends on the vibe. I mean, I've said that to my husband. Should we go and do, you know, like an overnight ghosty thing? Because he loves anything to do with ghosts and any mysteries. But then if something's going to happen on the film, he pretends he needs a loo and runs out of the room, and it's because he doesn't want to see the point where there's a boo moment, you know.
The jump scare.
Yeah, exactly, the jump scare. He jumps a mile in the air if something happens. So I'm not sure if he would accompany me, but I think it would be fun, as long as it wasn't horrible. I wouldn't want to stay anywhere where there was a bad vibe, you know. If it was,
they're turning the cage in St. Osyth near us into an Airbnb. We're eagerly awaiting that one, aren't we, Elsa?
Yeah, I definitely want to go stay there.
Would you all go and stay at that one then, do you think?
I would stay anywhere if there was supposed to be ghosts involved.
I see. Didn't you have an Essex ghost experience?
I did, yes. It was it at the Globe Inn or something? All I know is it's on the main bus route from like Colchester Station to the university.
Yes, I know it well, yeah.
And it was obviously, like, looking at it from the outside, it was quite clearly a coaching in at some stage in its lifetime. And because obviously living in Newcastle and trying to get to Colchester isn't the easiest thing to do sort of in one day. And the fact that I needed to be at the university like 9 o'clock in the morning. I decided to stay over the night before, and I remember I got to the place, and obviously they'd put me up on the top floor, and you could tell because obviously the ceilings get lower and everything like that. Clearly this would have been either cheap accommodation or servants accommodation at some point in the past. And so I went in, got myself all settled and everything, and I remember it was a Thursday because Mock the Week was on. The weird details that you remember. And I was sort of just pottering about in my room, sort of getting ready for bed, and I could hear this like weird noise in the hall, and it sounded like someone who, like, I remember back in the day before people had wheels on suitcases, and you know, you'd sometimes hear people like literally just dragging the bags along the floor, and that's where it sounded like. So I went to the door to see if somebody needed a hand, and I opened the door and there was no one there. And even weirder, it sounded like someone had been dragging it along a wooden floor, except it was like that fake faux marble. Well, I said fake twice there, but you know what I mean. Sort of tiled floor. And I was kind of like, okay. And then just shut the door because I was like, whatever, I've got to get up early in the morning. And it's amazing how many like supernatural things I'll ignore if I've got stuff to do. And then it was like I was sort of like lying in bed, sort of watching the telly, and all of a sudden, I think I was sort of obviously hoping to go to sleep. And all of a sudden there was this really loud sort of knock on the bedside table next to us. And I was like, what? That wasn't me. And that also wasn't furniture settling as well. And I thought, because like the room hasn't changed temperature, like, you know what I mean? It's not like in the middle of the night when that stuff happens. And then the knocking happened on like each of the bits of furniture going around the room, a couple of knocks on every piece of wooden furniture, back round with the first one, then round again. Now I just went like, oh, like may have sworn. I was like, I've got to be up early in the morning, I haven't got time for this. And like there was a definite sort of shift in vibe in the room, like whatever, like whoever or whatever it was kind of like, whatever then. And then it sort of it left, and then I went to sleep. And then obviously the next morning went off to the university to register and thought no more about it. But so it always kind of makes me wonder if it was a coaching in, who or what was dragging what outside in the corridor, and who or what was trying to get my attention, and the fact that I was clearly not the most receptive guest in the building. But yeah, I think
I love that you were just like, oh, not tonight. Like,
yeah, like the most effective exorcist ever.
There was another time I was actually in John Knox's house in Edinburgh, and we're in this room with like wood paneling, and I suddenly felt someone like pushing down on my shoulders, and I just went, "Hey, no touching," because I really hate people touching it. And I just kind of bellowed it into the room, and there was this sort of like almighty bang off the wall, like someone had like hit the wall in Paddy and then like stormed out. And the guy I was with, like, he was out the room immediately, you know, and I was sort of standing there like, "Hey, you've been told." So I just kind of thought, really, like, you know, who knew I was going to grow up to become Buffy from Giles?
You are so Buffy, yeah.
I really want to go on a ghost hunt with you, Icy.
And me, a Geordie Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Just yell and go away things.
We know. Oh, we come up with some great. We should get some like commission for this. There's too many good ideas for TV programs and films being bandied around.
If we start seeing TV programs based off these ideas, that we're going to have to start suing.
Yeah.
Right. So Bethan or Icy, which one wants to go next?
I don't mind.
Neither do I. We're too polite.
Yeah.
I know I'm just saying we're too polite now. I'm the one who's been like telling ghosts to go away. So
Bethan, be a good host and go next.
I'll go next. I have got some ghost stories and I've got some folklore, but I need to not retract. I need to make an addition to a story I told last year. So last year I talked about hunting the wren, which is a lovely thing that happens in most parts of Wales, all of Wales on Christmas. And I talked about last year how they would get a wren and would kill it by spiking it on a holly bush and then taking it around. It was delightful. And they also used to try and knock a squirrel out of a tree. So, you know, but no.
Christmas spirit.
The Christmas spirit. No, apparently that's not all of Wales. That's just my weird neck of the woods. Because when I started to look at Wales as a whole, they caught the wren and put it in a cage, took it round and let it sing and then let it go. So I'm sorry, rest of Wales. It's just me, Glamorgan, and us weirdos who like to kill it and take it round. So
we now know the most violent place in Wales.
You do, yeah, yeah.
Didn't they also do it in Essex as well? We had a similar thing.
Yeah, the hunting the wren. There's a similar. It's
was it a robin? We went
a robin in Essex, and then something somewhere. I think there's various bird variations, but I think we're the only one that kills it. Yeah, sorry. So that's done. I can go on to other nice things now because I did find a lovely thing that apparently still happens in places in Wales. And have you ever heard of Plygane? Well, you've heard of Midnight Mass. Okay.
What the? Oh, no. Oh, do you know? You said Midnight Mass, and I was
not the TV series.
I was like Mike Flanagan.
Not Mike Flanagan. The actual mass at midnight, where everyone's it's by candlelight normally, and you sing carols, and it's really nice, really uplifting, even if you're not Christian or particularly religious. There's something nice about it. Very traditional. You know, you all walk home together or go to the pub beforehand, and then the songs get quite gregarious because people have been to the pub. But there's another service that took place 3 a.m. and this was what Plygane was. This was Christmas morning, a festive tradition. This took place in 19th century rural Wales, and as I said, still taking part in some other places. Whereas most people would rise early for the service, there would be some that would stay awake throughout and then go out into the fields and into the villages and start singing. Now, traditionally, it would be a 3 or 4 part harmony carols, and then more people would join. It's mainly the men of the village, but then they go around and then it would culminate at sunrise. So I think that makes up for not makes up for the robin and the wren, but we can be nice. And they still do it at Tintern Abbey and St. David's Bishop's Palace. And then the day after Christmas, again, we're back to our pretty weird stuff again. So we have one day of niceness, and then the last person who's up on the day of Holming, which is the day after Christmas, is beaten with a holly sprig.
How do they know they're the last person up if somebody else isn't up to see them?
I think many people must get beaten.
Do they mean awake or up from
it's the last person to get out of bed in the morning.
Oh, okay.
It says here, thankfully now extinct. So I don't know if anybody's still doing that. But then we go back to another nice thing. See, we do horrible, weird things, and then we do some quite nice things. And we have a toffee evening, Nosan Giftlight. So it was a traditional part of Christmas and New Year, and families would invite their friends around, and they would have supper and games and make a special toffee that would accompany storytelling, which I think sounds delightful.
That's lovely.
And
that's what my dad does, actually.
Oh,
no, he doesn't tell stories. He just eats loads of toffee at Christmas.
I would gather around to watch that.
Just my dad
Keith.
stuffing Toffee. into his face.
And then beating with Holly. Well, he's part Welsh, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Well, I think he's totally Welsh. I'm part Welsh.
Oh well,
He's,
then he'll know
he's
all
totally
about it.
Welsh without an accent.
I also found some really lovely things from Castle Cork's kitchen. Have you seen Castle Cork? If you would have watched The Worst Witch on CITV when you were younger, that castle at
that
the
show.
beginning. And if you go towards Cardiff on the M4, it's that
Yeah.
beautiful fairy tale castle up in the hills that you could just see down this valley. It's built on a site of an old castle, but it's actually Victorian built. It's a folly, really. It's a hunting lodge for Cardiff Castle. And apparently, there's a free, here you go, a free bit of folklore. There's a tunnel that connects Castle Cork to Cardiff Castle, which I've tried to find on many occasions because apparently there's an X that marks a flagstone of the entrance to it. And there's eagles, giant eagles guarding a massive treasure down there.
I should have known you'd find a tunnel for this episode.
You know, I'd put a tunnel in there if I could. But yeah, don't worry, I'll come back to tunnels maybe. But this story had loads of things that Lord and Lady Bute did whilst they lived there, and they had loads of little Christmas traditions throughout the period. So they had Igwichlai, which was it's the start of the 3-week period, and that is when farm work was suspended. And as a symbol of this, the plough was carried to each home and placed. It says under the table. Now, I don't know how big the table was or how small the plough was, but who knows? But it was almost like it was laid to rest. Everyone would down tools and then they would drink beer and then they would wet the plough with the beer, which is a waste of beer in my opinion. But, you know, whatever gets you through the dark days. And then there was Gwych Ystwyth, which lasted 12 days. And that actually ended on the Epiphany. But because it was such a lark, it actually went on a lot longer sometimes. And that was, again, just merriment and probably toffee eating as we seem to do it.
It sounds is it a bit like the Lord of Misrule that we talked about last time? Yes,
yeah, a little bit of that. Probably I think that's where, it doesn't say here, but probably where the Mary Lloyd comes in as well, which is a folklore.
I was going to say, do you want to mention that?
No, I won't start an argument. But recently the Mary Lloyd was discussed as a fake law, which it's not. As someone who took part in the Mary Lloyd in Wales, but you know, that's it's okay.
It made many Welsh people seethe with anger.
Yeah, I wrote to Michael Sheen and said, "Are you aware?" He's just like, he's our representative.
Yeah, just generally.
Just generally, I just love the man.
Oh yeah, he is amazing.
Yeah, have you seen the speech he did to the Welsh football team?
No, I didn't.
It made me want to invade Suffolk. It was like, I felt so Welsh. It's just like, there's this red fury in my veins. I could have taken on anything afterwards. I'll send it to you. I will post a link on social media, then everybody else can be fired up with the Welsh. 2 more things. There was Thomasing, and this was on the 23rd of December, and women would go from house to house to beg for flour. It's not exactly the most funnest thing in the world, but, you know, we've had a lot of partying going on here, so, you know.
Really shit Halloween.
Really shit Halloween. And then there was Sean Corn, spelt like your brother's name, Elsa.
All right.
That's Chimney Pot John, and is literally translated as bloke that comes down the chimney, which I quite like.
I always forget it means Sean.
Yeah, it's sort of our Welsh Father Christmas. It says here, probably only goes as far back as the existence of chimney pots, but it might be where the chimney pot idea came from. Well, so there's like a little blurring of the line of like, you know, did we invent the chimney pot thing? Which, you know, I'm just going to, no one's going to argue with me. We did.
I'm not even going to attempt it.
I will try and get down my chimney this Christmas. And I found this last little bit of folklore now, and then I'll hand over to someone else before I go back to my ghost stories. But I'll read it out in Welsh first, because it sounds wonderful in Welsh. It sounds so magical. And then the English translation is hilarious. So bear with me. Dydd Calan yw I heddiw. Rydw i'n dyfod eich traws I morfen am I gainiog. Nai grist a bara a chwaws. O dwch drws I siriol. Heb newydd dim ochwedd. Cyn daw dydd Calan eto. Bydd llawer yn I beth. Basically translated as, today's the start of the new year. I've come to ask for some coins, crust, cheese. I've come to the door. You don't have to change your appearance. Before the arrival of the next year, many of us will be dead.
Cheery.
Just a nice cheery Welsh Christmas poem for you there.
I really like that. Sorry.
Don't make yourself look nice. We'll be dead next year.
That's brilliant.
I know, I want that on a t-shirt.
I was going to say that is absolutely t-shirt material, or at least a fridge magnet.
I think when we get round to doing Eerie Essex merchandise, that will be one of our first t-shirts.
Oh, it will. Just a special Christmas one. Next year, there'll be a t-shirt out. We'll send one to you, Jo, and you, Icy. Hey, don't get ready. You'll be dead.
Nice.
Oh, bring us some Northumbrian stuff. I'm ready to go up north.
I do actually have some Northumbrian folklore for Christmas, and this comes from William Henderson's, I can't remember the name of the title, because in the 19th century when everyone's book title was like 20 words long. But yeah, to borrow the lawman's way of describing things, like William Henderson, friend of the podcast, and yeah, I've no idea whether he'd like what I'm doing or not, but I'm going to assume he would, because I quote them loads.
I think he would.
But one of the things apparently it was customary for people to do up our way, thankfully that doesn't happen now, is that an old woman would carry figures of Jesus and Mary from house to house on Christmas Eve singing God Rest You Merry Gentlemen. I don't know if she was allowed to sing anything else or if it was just that, but there we go.
Just one woman?
Yeah.
That's a tall order.
And I don't know if it was the same one every year. It was just this particular. And imagine it's like, okay, now you're old enough to be the old woman with the figures. I mean, how much of a slap in the face would that be? Like, Merry Christmas, you're old enough to be the old woman.
Now go and do your work, you old bat.
And then in Yorkshire, obviously further south from me, obviously children would actually carry the figures through the West Riding, and they'd actually carry them in boxes that would be lined with spice, oranges and sugar, which sounds a lot more fun. And then of course you get all the thing around like mummers at Christmas. And one of the things that made me laugh when you mentioned the Mary Lloyd before, because I was just waiting for the it's not folklore thing, because William Henderson mentions it, and given his book was out in like 1879, and there seems to be this weird misapprehension that if something is considered new, it's folklore. It's like that's not the definition, because apparently in the north of England, mummers would carry an image of a white horse, so not the bone horse, but they would carry an image of a white horse. And he does mention the Mary Lloyd as it, but he does say that it's distinct from the northern version. And he actually thinks that our version was representing the Wild Hunt instead, because of obviously when you consider all the many Viking invasions, which will tie in with one of the ghost stories that I've got. But in our case, as Henderson understood it, the leader of the mummers stood in for Odin, and the white horse was Sleipnir, which in my view is awesome. But I just thought it was really cool that Henderson was like, oh yes, I know what the Mary Lloyd is. And I'm like, and you were writing in 1879, so... And you're a folklorist and you're talking about it.
People can stick things in their pipes.
And the other thing that I thought was really cute, I don't know if you've heard of this particular English belief anyway, so it's like the whole country was that bees hummed Christmas hymns on Christmas Eve. And I just love that. Which one? I don't know. Hopefully it wasn't God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, because that one's covered. But apparently people in Northumberland actually used to go out to see if they could hear it happening. I just think that's brilliant. That you'd have
like
people
a modern version. Oh, they're singing Wizard. Slade.
Oh, imagine if they got Whamageddon with the bees.
Oh,
That's another film. No, we've taken that. Bees singing Whamageddon.
I must admit, and this is completely irrelevant to folklore, but I co-authored a book about how body parts are gothic in film and literature, and I had the heart, and I was so chuffed that I managed to get a reference to Last Christmas into the heart chapter in the introduction, because it's a bit of a weird concept of someone like physically, like, I'm like, do you physically give your heart to someone? Because then if it's the very next day they give it away, they give your heart to someone else. What were they going to do with it?
Would you consider Whamageddon a new folklore, a new folk custom?
It's a new Christmas custom. And my dad actually got involved this year because I explained the custom to him, and he came and he went, I fell in battle, you'll have to go on without us. And my mum was like, what?
I'm still going. I haven't been Whamageddon yet.
How? You were out drinking in town?
I have no idea. I mean, I went to where was it? The brew house. They're not the sort of type who play Wham. In fact, they played the entirety of Rumours twice whilst I was there.
Well, I told the guys in the office, it was just Ron and And I told them, and I said, they'd never heard of Whamageddon, and then Nathan came in for security, and they were all giggling, and I said, right, I'm going to nip to the loo. And then when I came back, they had it on blasting just to get me. Bastards. But it's okay now. I've fallen, so then we blasted it out the window, and then just watched people going no across the university squares.
I was going through Phoenix Food Hall, and the lasses on the florist counter were listening to it, and I was like, "Damn you!" as I went past, because I had heard it on the 23rd of November, which I think was excessively early.
It starts December 1st.
But that was the thing. Holly Elson from the Centre of Folklore, Myth and Magic was like, no, you've respawned. You're back in the game. And it starts on December the 1st. And then, so I lasted until Monday. So it's like, But I did have one final piece of Northern folklore, because to me, this just sums up my neck of the woods. And one of the things that you could potentially have as a visit, most people have carol singing and things like that. We had sword dancers, and this was quite common between the Cheviots in the north right down to the Humber in the south. And the dances and the songs that they would perform were different depending on what location they were in, but they would still do them. And I have actually seen a sword dance performed in a pub, and it was, it must have been a few years ago, and I was on a first date with someone, and these people just trooped into the pub, and did the whole thing with the swords, and then just stood at the bar drinking. It was the weirdest thing to see out of nowhere. So as far as first dates go, that was quite cool to happen. He didn't plan it, obviously, because that would have been even cooler, but it was such a northern sort of custom to just see people dancing with swords. And Henderson thinks that it actually came from the war dances of the Danish and Saxon invaders that then sort of settled here. And because apparently he'd found an account by another folklorist who had talked about the sword dance of the Goths and the Swedes, and that apparently had allusions to Odin in it. And the performance involved 9 people, and I just think the idea of 9 people dancing with swords, you would think it would be a health and safety nightmare.
Yeah, in a pub, in an enclosed space with lots of people drinking.
I don't think they did it in pubs. That was just one I saw. But and the pub they did it in is not very wide. But in general, they would go door to door and do it. And apparently, you would have 5 people danced. 1 person would carry clothes, so they would have costume changes throughout. 2 people played clowns, and 1 person played the fiddle. And apparently the characters differed, so you would sometimes get in sort of Newcastle and Sunderland, you had a sailor and a skipper would appear, because obviously Newcastle and Sunderland are both ports, but they're not in the Durham one, which is obviously quite landlocked. So it must have been fascinating to see people doing the rounds, and people must have been fit to do that several times of an evening, to just kind of start dancing with swords. But I just love the way Henderson just has this thing about, yes, this is because of the Vikings, this is because of the Vikings constantly. So he's obviously fascinated by the history of the area, and it is quite cool to just think, I'm so glad people don't do that now, because I can just imagine our Facebook community group would go wild if there was people running around with swords knocking on people's doors.
It beats the usual, there's another pothole, or who's letting off fireworks.
I think a few years ago in Colchester, we had somebody running around with a machete in the street. So I don't know how they'd feel about swords.
I suppose we have
they didn't like the machete.
We have the Gimp Man of Essex.
Yes, he followed us on Twitter recently.
He did. I was so excited about that. But he has a copycat.
Does he?
There's been a whole hoo-ha about it.
I had no idea.
We have a Gimp Man.
I dread to think what he waves around.
Exactly what you'd assume a Gimp Man to wear.
There's also I think I've talked about this before, but I think there's also a man who dresses up as he basically it's just like plants. It's like a walking
green man.
Yeah, it's a green man. I've seen it before, but I keep on meaning to look this up, but he does walk around.
His little bush?
Sorry?
You see his little bush?
I think he is a little bush. That's what he's meant to be. But I've got to find out more about that, because it keeps on coming up recently, and I keep on remembering it and going, I know that's from somewhere, but I can't think where I've seen it.
Is that May Day then? When is it just generally he's walking around like that? Or...
I think he goes and plants things.
Okay.
Himself.
Yeah. He just digs a hole and then gets in.
We had that guy from Bristol who was walking around with, wasn't it like a cardboard box on his head or something? What's that guy doing?
That's just Bristol for you.
It is generally, that is Bristol. We do eccentric people really, really well down here, which is why I feel very comfortable in Bristol.
And Northumberland sounds immense, Icy. It just further highlights the fact that we need a folklore roadshow on BBC. We'll get a double-decker bus and we'll go around everywhere and look at all the new and the old and the lost folk traditions and get involved with them, and it would be awesome.
And the thing is, we do still have some of them, like obviously the Tower Barrows of Allendale, I think it is, and things like that. So some of them still happen, and yeah, we've got all sorts. We've got vampires, we've got fairies, obviously, we've got the brown men of the moors who will eat you. You know, yeah, definitely come visit.
Yeah, that'd have to be like a whole season on the show. Like to just the north.
Can I bring you back down to Essex for a moment?
You can.
I've got a very tiny story, and I've got a much more in-depth story. And I know, Bethan, you've got some Welsh ghost stories, haven't you?
I have.
So maybe I should do my long story first, and then I'll leave my tiny little story to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I said I'm bringing you back down to Essex, and don't have a go at me, but this one doesn't actually quite take place in Essex.
What?
But it does involve the Earl of Essex.
Oh,
yes, I'm talking about Geoffrey de Mandeville. Now, I have actually spoken about good old Jeff before. The last time we met him was in our Buried Treasure episode, and he was more of a side note. Honestly, I think Lin-Manuel Miranda should write a musical about Jeff. He was a very interesting character. He was a very ambitious, scheming, and rebellious earl. And a merry old soul he definitely was not. So the last time I mentioned him was in connection to Pleshy Castle, which was one of his holdings. And he played a very ingenious game of switching between Stephen and Matilda during the Age of Anarchy in 1135 to 53. And he truly played them back and forth, getting assurances from Matilda of titles he would hold for helping her, and growing ever more powerful as Stephen gave him more and more titles for his support. King Stephen was eventually advised to put the Earl of Essex down before he got so powerful he could easily topple him off the throne, which seems to be really short-sighted that he just kept on giving him more and more power to the point where Stephen became so weak he couldn't actually take Geoffrey down himself. But he did wait for a year after he got this advice, and it was around the end of September in St Albans when Geoffrey, who was attending court, was openly accused of treason by some of his rivals. And he treated the charges with cynical contempt, apparently. However, he was still arrested by the king after a violent struggle. And under threat of being hanged, he was forced to surrender his castles at Pleshy and Saffron Walden. But the worst one was he was forced to surrender the Tower of London, which was his true source of power. For some god-unknown reason, he was then freed. I believe somewhere that his father-in-law turned up and surrounded the area with his men, demanding to let Jeff go. So off Geoffrey went, teaming up with his brother-in-law, William de Say, to sack the Fenlands. And he absolutely terrorised the area, plundering as he went, and eventually took the Isle of Ely. Then from there, at his base, he seized Ramsey Abbey, which he fortified and then made his new headquarters. And it was claimed by one chronicler, Henry of Huntingdon, that during his occupation of the abbey, blood exuded from the walls of the church and the cloister adjoining, witnessing the divine indignation. So obviously he didn't really treat it with respect when he took it over. He seized the gold and silver altar vessels, the copes of the cantors, I'm not sure what those are, which were interwoven with precious stones and all kinds of other ornamentation from the church, and then sold them off at a very low price to anyone who was willing to buy them so he could pay his men to go off and do more plundering. And guess what? The Pope doesn't like it when you sell off his valuables to pay your soldiers, so Jeff got himself excommunicated. And there were any number of offences that he was charged with as well, including torture, robbery, and ransoming people when he was terrorising the Fenlands. And he managed to carry on like this for some time because King Stephen was in such a weak position and didn't have the power to put him down. But Geoffrey eventually met his end in August 1144 at Burwell Castle whilst laying siege to it. A stray arrow pierces his skull, but it does take him a month to die. However, since he's excommunicated, he can't receive a Christian burial. So the Knights Templar cart off his body to London, and according to one source, encase his body in a lead water pipe and hang it from a tree in their orchard until he's allowed to be buried. Now, after such a life, you'd almost expect Geoffrey to have a ghost story. And lucky for us, it's a Christmas ghost story. The first reported sighting took place The first reported sighting took place a week before Christmas in 1926. Mr. Gibson, a watchman guarding the roadworks in Churchill, was minding his own business when a ghost loomed towards his fire. As the ghost grew nearer, Mr. Gibson made out the figure wearing armour and a cloak, which in one account says it's black and another account says it's red. Now, for 1926, this is pretty outlandish attire, but what really set the figure apart was that it was a walking skeleton. Mr. Gibson quite rightly ran off and went to his employer to say that he wouldn't be taking on that duty anymore unless they paid him an extra shilling. This led to a council investigation into the ghost sighting, which revealed to them a plethora of reported nightly activities by Geoffrey de Mandeville. One homeless man reported seeing the skeleton rise out of the ground like he was coming out of a drain. A few housewives reported hearing clattering and banging out in the street and even inside their own houses, and they were certain it was caused by Geoffrey de Mandeville. People who lived on the street claimed that they knew he was about because their dogs would become scared stiff. The councillors decided to conduct a vigil at the roadworks to see if there was any truth to these claims. Though they did not see Jeff materialise in front of them, they did feel the rumble of the ground beneath them as though someone was on horseback galloping by. And there wasn't a tube line underneath. It was way away from any tube station. But hunting Jeff became a popular pastime for errant ghost hunters around East Barnet after this. And at one point, 400 people gathered along the street around Christmas just to see if he would turn up. But the next sighting wouldn't take place until Christmas Eve 1932, when a group of people met at a bridge over Pims Brook in East Barnet at midnight and heard uncanny sounds and followed them until they reached Monk's Frith, where the sighting they had been hoping for took place. The first thing they saw was a spectral hound running towards them, and a few minutes later a knight followed clad in armour that gleamed silver in the moonlight and a red cloak. So it seems that Geoffrey de Mandeville's ghost will only appear every 6 years in person around Christmas, though many other reported phenomena take place in the meantime. It's been speculated that he's due to make his next appearance this Christmas. So eyes are peeled in East Barnet for the ghost of the rebel Earl of Essex and his headless hound.
Oh, I was supposed to ask when he was due again. So this year.
It's this year, yeah, around East Barnet. I really struggled getting through that one. I don't know what's going on with my... It was like blurring out in front of me.
I wonder if anyone has that on their 2022 bingo card.
Geoffrey de Mandeville.
Yeah.
That's a great name as well.
I really like him as a character. He just seems like he was just... I don't want to... The phrase I'm thinking of is too rude to say, but he was like an effort and find out person.
Yeah. A scallywag.
He was a scallywag, yes.
Rascal.
I do think Lin-Manuel should do a musical about him, though.
Another idea. Copyright Elsa. Jo, do you have any stories?
Any West Country stories? Well, I mean, the big thing around these parts is the wassailing, which of course is sort of usually after Christmas. It's usually kind of early January, and there's some great wassail events around here, all over the West Country. That's where they step out into, the orchard. We've actually got a apple tree in our garden, so we've done this one year. You go out there with your pots and pans or your whistles, and you bang your pots and pans because it's kind of waking up the tree so that it produces a lot of fruit that year.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. And there's an orchard just near here. It was an old burial site at one point. It was an old, it was some kind of old burial site, and the community got permission to, buy it from the council, and it's now community run orchard. So we went to a really lovely one there one year, and lots of carols, songs but most importantly, drinking lots of hot mulled cider.
That's actually I saw there was a program on the other day. I think it was a French tradition that people would go out to the apple orchards and pour this year's cider around the trees to ensure that there would be a good crop for next year.
Yeah, that's right. That would be involved in it as well. And some of the ritual ceremonies here, a libation to the tree, maybe to the beings of the tree. That's what I would do if I was putting it there. But yeah, it's basically to the tree to, as a libation and a thanks. And so yeah, a lot of that goes on. And in one that we went to, again, just very in our local area, very close by, they hung toast on the tree as well. get pieces of bread and toast and kind of hang them onto the tree. So for the birds, but that again, it's kind of an act of giving and an encouragement to the tree to produce. So
That's lovely.
That's always nice. I've got a really lovely old book here. Don't know if you can see that.
Oh, that's a beautiful old book.
It is. It's lovely. English folk rhymes. And when was this published? Let's have a quick look. 1892. There we are. So this is lovely. So this is they've taken it from the Christmas book, Christmas in the Olden Time. As you say, I see about 20 words for it at the title. Christmas in the Olden Time, its customs and their origin, 1839. So in Devonshire, after partaking of hot cake and cider, still there with the cider, the cake before it is eaten being dipped in the liquor. So they obviously dip their cake in the hot cider and eat the cake. Then the folks proceed to the orchard. A piece of the moistened cake is deposited in a fork of the tree, and the cider is thrown over the latter. The men discharge firearms, and the women sing, "Bear blue, apples and pears enow, barnfuls, bagfuls." Well, it would be enough, enough. It must be enough, right? Enow. Barnfuls, bagfuls, sackfuls, hooray, hooray, hooray. And they say in some places it's observed on New Year's Eve. So it's kind of, that's pretty wassaily.
That sounds good fun.
Yeah.
If it involves mulled cider, that sounds even better.
I mean, that just makes every Christmas celebration better, doesn't it?
There's a lot of
and cheese. If you go to any of the good ones down here, there's also excellent cheese around.
You've sold it to us now.
Cool.
Yeah, we're coming for that cheese.
Yeah.
All right. Bethan, did you want to do your Welsh ghost story that you wanted to tell?
Yeah, I've got a couple of little ones. I went on, of course, where we all start our research, probably looking on the old paranormal database, especially as they've got a lovely section for Christmas. So I just thought, I wonder if there's any Welsh ones in there. And they didn't disappoint. There was a couple. They're only little. I have got a longer one from my favourite book, which I'll share with you in a moment. But there was one as a Welsh person, I still struggle to get my tongue around this one, so bear with. Pont Wreath Fendigaid, which is in Dyfed, and it's Strata, Florida. It's on the former site of the old abbey. And this is reoccurring on the 25th of December. There's a phantom devotee of God who returns once a year because he's desperately trying to rebuild the altar that was destroyed. And all throughout the year, legends say that you can see candles being lit throughout the abbey or the abbey ruins and hear music from the ruins. But I just like the fact that there's this poor little guy that comes back once a year desperately to fix the altar and is gone again, like this sort of continual loop.
It's like a very slow game of Jenga.
Very slow game of Jenga. Or like that Greek myth, who was it that was pushing the boulder up the hill?
Sisyphus.
Yes.
That one. Very similar. And then we go over to Gwynedd in Carreg Llyda, which translates as the robber's stone. And there's so many stones in Wales. I think are the stones that get wet for no reason out of nowhere, or a stone that can't keep still and goes for a wander. We do like wandering stones. And this one is particular to Christmas night, and it happens on midnight. The stone is actually supposed to be a thief who stole a Bible, and once he stole the Bible, it was turned into this stone while he was carrying the Bible over his shoulder. And if you look at the shape of it, it does look a little bit like someone carrying something over their shoulder. And every Christmas, the stone runs 3 times around the field. Yeah, and that's it. To what end? Who knows? And I don't know whether it's Widdershins or clockwise, but there you go. Just one of our many stones that arse around a field, which happens a lot. But most ghost stories, especially from where I come from in Glamorgan, very often involve treasure. Now, when we looked up treasure for our Eerie Essex episode, there was a lot, and I was gutted that I knew that Wales was just full of them. I mean, you can't move for treasure ghosts. And this is the book that started it all. I showed it before we hit the record button. This is The Folklore of Glamorgan by Alan Roderick. And I found this is the first ever folklore book I ever bought, and it was on the floor of a secondhand bookshop, and it was covered in dust. No one had looked at it. So I was intrigued. I picked it up and I bought it, and I've never looked back. It's been folklore all the way. And it's also Owen and I, with our podcast Spectre of the Sea, we get a lot of our stories from here because we're currently going along with Glamorgan Ghosts. So thank you, Alan, wherever you are. you're still around. You've given us a lot to get our heads around. And I picked a couple of short stories. One, a lot of the time, ghosts would have treasure that they hadn't been able to dispose of or pass on in their lives, and they've come back to haunt and try to reveal where the treasure is. Often they want it disposed of or thrown in a river, but there is the odd occasion where people get to keep it, but that's not very often. There's one story. This is Elspeth John. Elspeth John lived near the River Ely and was required to throw a hidden object around the beginning of the 19th century. Elspeth was born about 1795 and was sent to service at a farmer at Prisk near Cowbridge when she was between 10 and 14 years old. As soon as she arrived at the farm, she found herself being continually followed by a shadowy figure of a man dressed in dark clothes. At first, he only looked at her, and she steadfastly ignored him. Eventually, however, he began to torment her, and at last she told her master and mistress to his unwelcome attentions. Their advice was to be brave and to speak to the unearthly apparition, but she said she could not. Time passed by, and the family grew to know when the ghost was present by the terrified look on Elspeth's face as she was set about the household duties or cried aloud in her bed at night. Finally, she was persuaded to put her trust in God and ask the ghost what he wanted. And the ghost told her that he was relieved that she had found the courage to speak, because he was under a spell which would only break when she spoke. How many ghosts are wandering around just going, please talk to me? Bless him. He then instructed her to take up a board from an upstairs room and take out what she found and follow him. She did as he said, and the two of them went downstairs and through the living room, despite the efforts of friends and neighbours to stop her, and left the house. Once outside, she was taken up in the air and carried away at great speed. The ghost flew her to a part of the Ely River where she dropped whatever it was they were carrying down into the waters below. On their way back to the farm, the ghost told Effie that they would now that he would leave in peace. She never saw him again, and having been sworn to secrecy, never revealed to anyone what had been thrown in the water. Doom, doom, doom. I like the fact that there's quite a few ghosts that make you fly in Glamorgan. So
wasn't that, I think I remember listening to one of your Spectre of the Sea, and that was kind of incorporated into the, is there
very similar one?
Yeah.
Because we went along the River Ogmore, where, whenever they say, oh, but ghosts can't actually hurt you, I'm like, excuse me. In Glamorgan, in Ogmore Castle, there's a ghost that guards the treasure at the bottom of the tower. It's not been found yet, but apparently she comes every 7 years. And there was one particular person who went to try and find the treasure, and this ghost appeared, and she started attacking. No, first of all, she said, if you take half the treasure and leave the other half, then I'll leave you go in peace, because he found it, and it was sort of like, okay, you found it, well done, but be on your way. And he did take half of it, but then he came back for the rest, and when he came back for the rest, she, was no other way of putting it, beat the shit out of him. She had claws, she scratched him, absolutely beat him to an inch of his life. And then he died 3 weeks later of an unknown illness.
Internal bleeding.
Probably, yeah. No, and the way they described these things was pretty grim and detailed. It's like his innards were on his outards. Like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And so, oh, but ghosts can't hurt you. Well, yeah, just don't go to Ogmore Castle. I found another story. This is my last one, because there's another ghost that couldn't speak until spoken to, and it's a bit grimmer, this one, so enjoy. A rather more macabre story was told by a Cardiff man who was walking home from Canton to Leckwith one night when he was joined by another man who dogged his footsteps and looked at him imploringly. As the Cardiff man said, he could not rid of himself of this silent companion, and this is his actual words now. I called him names and threatened him. He only kept looking at me but said nothing. I got into a rage and said, "Nay, no do, what do you want?" And tears ran down his face, and he said, "I couldn't speak until you asked me." Oh. Another one. I am dead, but I cannot rest till my head is buried. I was a boatman, he said, down by the Ely River, and my head is on the bank, and devils like to play football with it. If you come and bury it, I shall rest. So I agreed to go in search of the skull, and he took me down to the river, to the bend, just above the Taff railway bridge, as it is now. And there, by a bluish light, was a lot of people kicking a football with the poor man's skull. I thought I would go to them praying, and as I came, they all flew away. So I took the poor man's head and buried it in a soft place, digging a hole with my knife, and the ghost stood and looked at me. Then he went out like some smoke.
Oh, It's kind of gory, but it's sweet.
Weirdly sweet, isn't it? But I think what we've learned from this is that if there is a ghost, just say hello, and then they might just go, "Oh, thank God for that."
Or if you're icy, tell them to calm down.
Yeah, yeah. I think who are you going to call? Icy Sedgwick.
Oh my God, I might start getting business off the back of it.
Yeah, you can live off it. You'll be this like sort of traveling exorcist.
Can you just imagine the TV show that would be?
It would be awesome.
I'd watch
Away with
it.
your pet.
Brilliant. That would be real exorcists of Northumberland.
Yeah. What would be your outfit? If you could pick, like, would it be like, I imagine some sort of almost like black version of the Ghostbusters sort of boiler suit?
Oh God, that would make us look like one of Slipknot. I would, just for a laugh, I'd probably turn up in like neon pink or something.
That would be awesome.
Just like whatever people would least expect to see. Because I like confounding expectations, so why not? I must admit, I've got a bit of a thing with the idea of exercising ghosts, because it's like, well, we don't know where we're sending them.
Yes, it's true.
So I'm always a little bit like, can not just ask them to go somewhere that it's better suits them, and then they can choose and then not be where you are. So I suppose it'd be more like a polite exorcism.
A removal service.
Yeah. Or
Liaise,
almost like HR for ghosts.
Yeah.
Is there a position that you'd rather have? Because you look at a lot of ghosts and they're doing really boring things. Like there's a shop in town where apparently, like, they hear footsteps in the staff room and someone runs up and down the stairs, and you're like, that would be a really rubbish way to spend eternity. So I sort of feel like if you could be like, would you rather, instead of having this city centre pub where you're more scared of the hen night, would you rather have this quite quaint like Airbnb in the middle of nowhere? Just saying. Oh, it could be like Escape to the Country, but with ghosts.
Yes.
Oh my God, that would be awesome.
That'd be fun. Oh my God, if the BBC are listening, then I'm down for that.
Oh, see, I mean, they've got their entire schedule sorted out just by listening to this.
Do you know what that really reminds me of? It reminds me of this computer game I used to play obsessively, which was called Ghostmaster.
Oh my God, I had that.
Did you? Oh, I loved it so much. But that was like HR for ghosts, wasn't it? And you had to kind of like, fight, like have the right skills, the right ghost for the right job, pick the right set of skills to do a specific task. Like, I wouldn't mind that as a child.
Cash in the attic. I think you want about ghost cash in the attic at one point as well.
Yeah, because I was like, if you take the Haunted Collector, where obviously like John Zaffis used to come in and be like, here's this priceless family heirloom, it's haunted, and then take it away and put it in his museum. And I'm like, ooh, imagine if you didn't do it for necessarily priceless heirlooms, but just the haunted items in your attic. So it would be the Haunted Collector meets cash in the attic. And I ran that by some of my students and they were like, would totally watch. So just saying. Although you're not allowed to list haunted items on eBay.
Are you not? There's thousands of
People do
haunted
it.
dolls on there.
There's dieback boxes and all
where, like,
sorts.
people list them, but because you can't prove it, like someone tried selling a ghost in a jar once, but the only way you'd know is if you opened the jar. But then if you went, well, it's empty, they'd just go, yeah, because you let the ghost out. I mean, someone tried to sell a can of Michael Schumacher's exhaust fumes once on eBay, so, yeah.
That you just remind me of a girl who was hospitalised for selling her own exhaust fumes. Have you not heard this one?
No.
She was like specifically eating like things where she would produce a lot of gas and it almost ruptured her stomach. But she was selling jars of it for like thousands on eBay.
We're in the wrong
Capitalism,
job.
man. Capitalism.
I know. But she made a good amount of money off of it.
Yeah, she had to pay for like stomach surgery. by the
Yeah.
time of it.
Cabbage, surely. It's much cheaper. Better for you.
What was I didn't catch the first bit.
Cabbage.
Yeah.
Oh God. Just to, I don't know, raise the tone of the conversation again slightly. I'm really sorry I have to do it because I've got one more story.
Go on then.
This is a strange incident that took place around Christmas, and it was recorded in the Grim Almanac of Essex. And it comes from an Eliza Vaughan, who was the daughter of the Vicar of Finchingfield. And she recorded this story from some people who came to visit her. And this was a woman who'd passed away recently, and she was claimed to be the village witch. So when she died, her relatives were very careful about going through her possessions, especially with the woman's body still lying downstairs in the coffin. And they came across a box containing a number of strange little things, and they describe them as strange little things and nothing else. They don't say what they looked like at all. But they suspected that these were the woman's imps, a little bit like with Canudin and the white mice.
The white mice.
And they didn't know what to do with them. So they threw the box in the fire and they went about their business, and they cleared up all the woman's other stuff and, divvied up what was valuable and went off. Family members went off with it. But when they were finished going through all the possessions, they went downstairs to pay their last respects to this relative of theirs who was a supposed witch. And they found that the coffin was empty apart from piles of ashes.
She spontaneously combusted.
Well, because they threw the imps in the fire. So they think that when they did that, the woman also...
The poof.
Yeah, poof. And it's not a Christmas story, but it happened around Christmas, according to the Grimm Almanac.
That makes it.
So I wanted to include it, and that's my last little story.
The Grimm Almanac is an amazing title, though.
I think it's like it's like a series of like the Grimm Almanac of Suffolk, the Grimm Almanac of wherever, Herefordshire or something.
I think I've got the Almanac of the Uncanny, which is a Reader's Digest.
But it is a brilliant book, actually, the Grimm Almanac of Essex. It includes things like murders and police reports and so on and so forth, but it does have folklore and like folk medicine, unusual punishments, ghost stories, curses, interspersed amongst all this sort of factual, like so-and-so went somewhere. And I think that's where I got the leg story from for the Poltergeist episode, where somebody was driving through a village and found a dismembered leg, and that was just recorded in the almanac. Just an interesting incident that happened to take place, and it ended up in there.
Well, I've enjoyed these stories. I also want to make a formal apology to Elsa that I found a very good book about Essex at Christmas 10 minutes before we started recording,
which you've had for a year, and I forgot about it as well. I should have asked you for it.
That's the thing. I like go and buy. There's a really good secondhand bookshop in Wivenhoe. They've got like a section on folklore, and it's constantly being restocked. So I end up coming away with so many books. And the bless of the lady who runs it now knows what I'm after. So she's like my dealer. got some under the counter for you. And then the beer shop is behind it, where Sammy, who listens to this podcast, she's like, I got some darks in. Do you want some? So I got little dealers like all around the village. I've just flicked through, and I saw the 21st of December written in here, which is today. The longest night and the shortest day. Wherever the wind is on this day, there it will stop for the next month. It is also St. Thomas's Day, and on this day, old women went a-Thomasing or collecting money. Old women, again.
Slightly
Bless them. It's too cold
Halloween.
to be sending them out. There you go. So it's good if whatever the wind
is. Was the Thomasing local to Essex then, or is it?
It was in Wales as well.
Ah,
I think it may even be in Ireland as well. Can't quite remember. Speaking of solstice, we did actually sing some songs this morning at the so it was at Stanton Drew.
Oh, those pictures you posted were lovely, Jo.
Yeah, it's great down there. And Adrian Rook does a fabulous go, every single time he puts on a really good ceremony for everyone. There was about 200 people there this morning.
Oh, wow.
That's the most I've ever seen. But he had pagan carols, which were, where the bloody hell are they? I don't know what I've done with them now. Oh, here they are. Yeah, he had some pagan carols that we were all singing. So I'm going to post that at some point. But yeah, it's good to have a good old sing-song on solstice.
Yeah.
So it's the carols that we all know and love, but with the words changed. Like,
that sounds good.
God rest ye merry pagan folk. And it carries on. Let nothing you dismay. Remember that the sun returns upon the solstice day. So you get an idea of the
Oh, that's lovely.
It was really good, actually. It was a real laugh. Yeah, some great ones. That's what we're going to do down here in Bristol.
Well, I actually had one last story.
Oh, go for it.
If anyone wants to end things with a ghostly monk.
Always.
Yes.
Always.
What have
That's a
they
good
been up
monk.
to now?
One of the things that you find a lot with the ghost stories in like Newcastle and wider Tyneside is we've got a lot of ghostly monks. And in Newcastle itself, we have 4 monasteries. and there's only one of them that you can really still see the remains of. But our most famous, I think, monastery in the area is actually out in North Tyneside, and that's Tynemouth Priory. Tynemouth Priory and Castle, I should say, because there's also the remains of a castle there as well, because we've got more castles than you can shake a stick at up here, and including one in town, which is hilarious when people don't realise Newcastle has a castle. That one always makes me chuckle. Designed by the same guy that did Dover Castle, incidentally. I can't remember which way around to go, but it's very, very cool. But anyway, Tynemouth Priory. So it stands on this sort of, and I love the fact I'm miming this so you can all see what I'm doing, but like nobody else can. And it's sort of in this little promontory that sort of sticks out into the North Sea, just next to King Edward's Bay. And then you've got King Edward's Bay on one side and like literally the Tyne on the other. And obviously back in the day, it used to be obviously a working monastery, obviously until Henry VIII came along and decided no more of that, thanks. And it's been all sorts of things over its year, but the time we're thinking about obviously is when the Vikings were, as they were wont to do up here, popping over to alleviate us of things that we'd amassed. Is probably the posh way of saying it. And they used to come over, and there was one particular prior of the monastery called Olaf, who was himself Danish, and he had actually been wounded in an earlier raid, and he was actually nursed back to health by the monks despite the damage that his party had done to the area. He was so impressed by this that he then converted to Christianity, joined the order, and then eventually became prior himself. And on this particular evening, and I don't know if this was I don't think this was at Christmas, because we don't really have Christmas ghost stories as far as I can find. We just have them all throughout the year instead. So I don't know if it's just because we've got less sunlight or what, but we do seem quite obsessed with ghosts up here and fairies. It's one or the other. But anyway, Olaf had this foreboding, things boded that a raid was imminent. And luckily, the priory itself is quite well situated for defence, because obviously it sticks out. It's got steep cliffs, you've got the sea there. And if anyone's never been in the North Sea, imagine the coldest thing you can and then make it colder all year round. It never gets warm. And so you had the sea, you've got the Black Middens, which are these sort of really dreadful rocks that claimed however many ships over the years. And they also had a moat, just to add a bit extra on. So the monks were pretty convinced that they were going to be fine, but still things boded. Olaf was convinced that things weren't going to go well. And a Dane called Eric the Red attacked with his band of attackers. And in the ensuing battles, and I love this detail, the monks then dumped a load of sharp rocks off the side of the sort of their battlements onto the men below. And I just love the idea of monks just being that hardcore in order to defend the monastery. They're just like, let's just to crush a whole load of men. And one of the people that one of these massive rocks landed on was Eric the Red. And being monks, they decided they couldn't leave an injured man to his injuries, so they actually brought him inside the monastery. And lo and behold, who should come and see what was going on but Olaf himself. And they noticed that Olaf seemed a little bit more troubled than you would expect when he laid eyes on this man. So he prayed over him, and, they did what they could for him, but unfortunately, the crush injuries were too bad and Eric succumbed to them. So the attackers, having lost their leader, fall back, and the monks are obviously singing hymns of thanksgiving and all this kind of thing, that the priory's being spared. And then eventually one of the monks is like, hang on a minute, Olaf's not here. You'd think he'd be chuffed. Where is he? So they go looking for him, and they find him apparently still on his knees in prayer in the chapel. Only he's not praying. He's actually frozen because he's died while praying. And they obviously bury him at the priory near Eric the Red, as the story goes. And both of the graves were tended with care. And none of the monks ever mentioned the brotherly similarity between the pair, and the look of recognition on Olaf's face when he saw, obviously, his erstwhile brother had been the one who was crushed outside the monastery. But Olaf apparently still prowls the priory even now, particularly when the wind blows from the east and the air's especially clear. So he's still keeping watch for invaders coming over from Scandinavia. And what he used to make of people coming over on boats to come and spend money in the northeast, because we used to have loads of Scandinavian tourists and it was great. What he made of those, I'm not sure. He's one of many ghosts at the priory. My favourite, and I don't want to add this one just purely because I get the chance to be as Geordie as possible. And I've mentioned this on Fabulous Folklore when I did the Wizard's Cave of Tynemouth. And it's down the side of one of these steep cliffs. There's this cave that nobody can get to. But apparently it was once believed to be haunted by the ghost of potentially a smuggler. And because of his name, he was called Jingle and Geordie, because most people end up getting called Geordie up here at some point. And the reason why it's funny for me, and obviously any Northerners listening to this might remember Alan Robson, who's this like legend of radio broadcasting in the Northeast, and he's super Geordie, like he's a million times more Geordie than me. And I just always like to think of him referring to the name of this cave as Jingling Geordie's Hole. And you would have said it like that. So every time I think of ghost stories in Time Out, that all I can think of is Jingling Geordie's Hole. And the idea of him walking around like jingling with his chains, because he's I think he'd escaped from somewhere and then somehow become a smuggler. He prowled around. There's a ghostly border collie. So yeah, Time Out probably cute. Yeah, it's a really sad story, but I won't go into it. But he was more loyal than his master.
Dog story like Gellert and all that. I can't. Oh, too sad.
So who's the one in Edinburgh? It's at the Greyfriars Bobby. Yeah.
So on that note, Plymouth Priory is definitely worth a visit, and it does have a lot of history attached to it, obviously, just for its age if nothing else. But yeah, lots of attacking and ghostly monks and so on.
That's fab. That's a great story.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and we do genuinely love monks on this show. They're the best stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
a lot of ours involve monks and nuns, and I will leave it there.
Yeah, we've had a fair few of those as well.
Yeah, we should look at nuns.
Yeah, I think we've got a few ghosts. I mean, we've got Borley. There's a nun there, but is it
we'll get
really
to
there?
Everyone keeps asking us about Borley, and it's like,
it's so overdone as well. And I know we're specifically Essex, but we can't bring ourselves to do it.
We will. I just think Langenhoe is so much more.
Yeah.
I know Harry Price was there, but
Harry Price has been everywhere.
He has.
There's another T-shirt for you.
He's been everywhere. Anne Boleyn, she gets around. The ghost.
Yeah.
What was the other one? Just wear what you like. Be dead next year. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this evening. It's been so lovely to hang out with you both. I just only wish we all lived closer, and then this could have been at a pub with chips.
Oh, chips. But also, it would have been lovely to have you all in person.
Yeah, that was a given.
Just anytime somebody mentions chips recently, my brain just goes Homer Simpson.
I'd think of that old advert, the Daddy O Chips one.
Oh, Daddy O Chips.
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you remember the crisp and dry advert with the oil? Mama don't want no fatty food from no cooking oil. They don't make adverts like that anymore.
I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah. I just demonstrated it.
I was thinking of Shake and Vac instead, which I think probably precedes that. Not crisp and dry, Shake and Vac.
You don't want to get them mixed up.
No.
Oh, no.
Carpet ruined forever.
We'll post links to these. And I think the most folk horror-y advert ever met the Judder Man.
Yeah.
Oh, that was brilliant.
Do you remember that, Jo?
It was weird.
The Judder Man, right?
In Jersey, because I used to comment to my grands, in the UK, and I'd be like, I'd just be really enjoying all the ads and the ad breaks because we didn't have any of that. We had sort of local ads from Farm Pasture and Clements Coast Road, Jersey, and things like that, coming out with their local supermarket ads.
I wish we had more local ads.
Oh my God, the Judder Man's on YouTube.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I have watched it on there before.
I'll put it on our Facebook chat. Jo has to witness the Judder Man when the moon is fat.
It is I saw this when I was a kid, and I remember thinking it was a surrealist nightmare. Mm-hmm. And also sort of questioning what the real purpose of alcohol was at that time. Yeah,
did it just become the Judder Man's servant or something? It was very much a fairy tale. Yeah, don't drink their food. Don't drink their food. Don't drink their drinks or eat their food.
That was a Christmas advert, wasn't it?
Yeah. Kind of. There you go. At least it's relevant. There you go. Well, I've got no more stories for tonight.
I'm tapped out.
And now I just want some chips.
Yeah,
chips. Go get some chips. Chips.
Should we say goodbye then?
Yeah. I think so. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Lovely to see you all. We will meet in person, I'm sure of it, at some point.
Well, we're going to have a BBC series.
Pardon?
Yeah.
The BBC can't deny us now.
Oh, yes. True. Who's
going to drive the bus, though?
Well, I can't drive, so it's probably best you don't let me anywhere near it. I mean, I could give it a go. I mean, how hard can it be? But
Bethan can't drive either, and I'm terrified of motorways. So
I do believe when I floated the idea, the lawmen volunteered.
Oh my God,
so-
that would be hilarious.
Yeah.
That would be.
I can just imagine them bickering in the front over who gets to like ride shotgun.
I know, it'll be hilarious. So we'll just sit there just watching it all. We'll take a dog with us too, because you have to.
Well, have great evenings and have a lovely Yuletide, Christmas, Saturnalia. We're kind of we're kind of smack bang
covering all
Saturnalia
bases
at the moment, but yeah, cover all bases.
I hope Santa visits and you see him, Jo. I hope Santa visits.
Yeah, I hope you have a Santa sighting this year.
I am excited.
Are you going to stay up?
I never know. I will stay up. Well, the Munchkin goes to sleep quite early, so that's not so difficult these days. But this year, my son said, "Look, you don't need to sneak in." He's 20. You don't need to sneak into my room anymore. I said, "Shall I just put it downstairs by the Christmas tree?" He said, "Yeah, that'd be fine."
Aw.
Actually,
Do you leave out cookies and mince pies and brandy?
not in the old days, but I know that's kind of a thing now. So we would now. We will for
My
our
parents
little one.
always did that for us.
Really? Yeah, we never did that.
This was again with the tongue in cheek. Oh yeah, Santa came and he had the mince pie and then drank all that brandy.
Bet he did.
Dad like stinking of booze the next day.
We used to leave things out for like the reindeer, but never Santa.
I used to
Really?
leave carrots, and
Yeah,
then
we
there would be
did
like a
used to
really
leave a
obvious
carrot.
bite mark.
But
Yeah.
do you not think though? Like even sorry, this is just like it's like tangent, but with the whole thing of like with brownies, like you leave them food, but like you don't give it to them. You just leave it somewhere that they'll find it. Is Santa actually a brownie?
Could be.
Oh, and like
can he tidy my house for me?
but then you know how brownies can become boggarts if they're annoyed. Could that be Santa and Krampus? Santa becomes Krampus if you're naughty.
Or maybe that's when he just starts leaving like really rubbish things. Because considering every year, if I go past Pandora in town, there's always a massive line of people obviously wanting.
I never get that. Yeah.
So I was a wish list, people. Yeah, I'll shush now. That's me done.
No, I love a good tangent, and I think you've uncovered something there. Well, last time we got together with Jo, we still need to do that digging into dogging areas and fairy sightings.
I knew you'd bring that up. God.
Well, we kept bringing up fairy sightings in specific areas, and especially in Essex. And I kept saying that's a well-known dogging area. That's a well-known dogging area.
I just want to know how you knew all these places were well-known dogging areas.
Yeah, this is.
I think Colchester Gazette once had a very slow news day,
Yeah.
and they did top dogging sites.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. But also, everybody knew Hilly Fields was anyway.
Everyone
it was like
knows Hilly Fields, where there was a sighting and UFOs.
a fairy sighting, not just a sighting of people dogging.
Imagine if there was on the paranormal database dogging.
Has its
Sorry.
own section.
I'm
Look at
working for like Essex's tourist board.
I know. I was going to say we should get sponsored by them. We are, so probably we shouldn't. They recently give us a grant to make Essex seem nice. That note, they might bring people here. It depends on what you're into.
It's a certain clientele.
We don't kink shame on Eerie Essex.
No, I was like literally laughing at the tourist board there.
And on that note,
On that note, well, one little thing before we do go. Eerie Essex is on the road in January. We're going to be posting dates and locations where we're going. We're going to Basildon. We're going to Epping,
going back to Chelmsford.
Chelmsford Record Office, Clacton, Wivenhoe, Colchester. We're going to Epping twice next year because we are in the summer. When Aaron from Appalachian Podcast comes over, we're all going hunting Bigfoot. Are you joining us in Epping, you two?
Quite possibly. When is it going to be? July?
June, probably. I see. Do you want to come and look for budget Bigfoot? We can't afford to go to America.
It would depend when in June, because I'm supposed to be going to a conference in Sweden at the end of the month. So,
Oh, that's slightly more exciting.
That
than
is more exciting than like
budget Bigfoot.
budget Bigfoot. Don't downplay budget Bigfoot. That's going to be a good.
again,
A
an
grand.
excellent name.
It is, yeah. Another T-shirt. So, thank you again for. I keep saying that, and then we find something else to talk about. But this time, we'll let you go, and we'll speak soon.
So it's goodbye from Elsa.
It's goodbye from Bethan.
Goodbye from Jo.
And goodbye from Icy.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
If you'd like to get in contact with us with a story of your own or any more information about what we've discussed in this episode, you can reach us at eerieessexpodcast@gmail.com.
Or if you'd like to contact us on social media, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram under the handle Eerie Essex. On Twitter, we are under Eerie_Essex. You can also find us on Patreon and Ko-fi if you'd like to support the podcast.